of metal? I mean,
Yeah, it was all steel. Yeah.
All steel, but the seats were wooden.
That's right.
And did he buy it up at Tajma? Was it like?
I don't know where he bought it. Bought it off a junkyard, as far as I'm concerned. From what I understand, everybody thought he had lost his mind. My grandfather just said, you know, there goes my son, my youngest son. He's crazy.
If the engine's good.
Well, there wasn't any engine.
Oh, really?
Oh no, you had to put an engine to it.
Oh.
You still did. I mean, when I was working on it, the engine was separate from the wheel.
Oh, wow.
And it was the same with the merry-go-rounds.
Sure.
Early merry-go-rounds never had engines inside. They were all outside, and you ran a belt under the platform.
So, anyways, he buys this thing, this Ferris wheel, does clean it up. I mean, the people
And paints it all up, and everybody, and then had it set up. The first place that he set it up, I think he took in $500. And everybody thought maybe he wasn't so crazy.
Do you know where his first setup was?
No, I don't.
And in those days, could he just, and so he starts moving around with it, it's
Yeah,
portable.
but then he didn't like all the labor intensive putting all those bolts back together in there.
Is he have a little crew with him, like the guys who would?
Well, yeah, but
two or
I
three
forget
guys.
who they are now. One of them might have been Al Byers, because he started pretty young with my dad. Another guy was the guy that had been in the Army during the World War I, who's been in the, what the hell was his name? I can't think of it right now, but had served with the American division in Europe, the Polar Bear Division. And that's the one that was served in Russia.
So your dad. So what this time frame wise, this is probably before World War I. He's got this ride, this Ferris wheel.
Oh no, World War I, because they got married in 1910, I believe it was 10 or something like that, and the war started. We got in the war in 1916 or 17, something like that. And 18, I think it was, and that the war had already been raging, and
so that's when he bought the Ferris. So it was sometime during World War I. He
Yeah.
bought the Ferris wheel. So, and in those days, that was his only ride. And would he sell novelties and stuff around?
oh yeah, he was an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
I mean, he had his, but now he finally decided, well, let me see what I can do about putting this thing someplace where I don't have to put it up and take it down all the time. And you know what it was? Tajma Park. And that's where the ride went. And it would sit there every summer. And I can remember until the boat sank in 1936.
Wow. And so he goes, he strikes a deal with whoever owns Tajma Park.
Yeah.
Now, is it still an amusement park at this point, or is it already an amusement park when he puts his ride up there, or?
Well, it was a recreational park, yeah. They had, some amusements, but then he put in, they had their own merry-go-round at Tajma. But see, they had another park before Tajma. They had Sugar Island. And my dad basically was set up, and he was working both places. He had a novelty stand, and he had started a novelty stand at Sugar Island, and he had one in Tajma. Sugar Island was the golden pot of the operation. Problem there was that the water was shallow to get a boat in there, and they only had one or two boats from the White Star Line at that time that could get into and anchor at Sugar Island. They sold both those boats, the dummies, and then the Tajma was a bigger boat. It drew more water, and it didn't always have to be able to get into Sugar Island. If the water was low, it didn't get in there. So what they decided to do was to close down the park and put everything in Tajma. And this was in 1922 or 23.
So he had two places going. So he buys his ride, he sets it up at Tajma first, or is it Sugar Island first? One of the two.
He had his rides all at Sugar Island to begin with.
Okay, so he's first off, maybe that first summer, whatever, he's going around to various locales, he sets the thing up, makes some dough, has to tear it down, but it says, that's stupid, let me go set it up somewhere, so I don't have to keep...
And he set it up at Sugar Island.
At Sugar Island, which is up near Harson's.
No, Sugar Island's at the south end of Detroit. It's off of Grosse Ile.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's right down the Lake Erie.
Oh, okay.
Still there, I might add,
Yeah.
but nothing there. But
Yeah. So Sugar Island, he sets up his ride. He's got the novelties. He's still got a novelty stand up at Tajma. And how's he getting between the two? Is he taking a ferry boat?
well, driving,
And driving? And,
great difficulty. But his major business was down at Sugar Island.
right.
They used to keep the bank open for him when the boat came in, so that he could put his deposit in. It took him beaucoup money.
So he was doing very well for
Oh,
himself.
yeah.
At this point, at least Jack is born. Possibly.
Yeah, Jack was smoking. He was about 10 years old, and he was smoking. He got in with some of the ride him.
Uncle Jack started smoking at 10.
Oh, yeah.
That's hilarious. Not really, but of course he lived till 90, whatever it was, 95.
Yeah, he quit a long time.
And how did he transport the? Did he buy himself a truck, or did he have a truck?
Well, they moved after the boats. After they closed down Sugar Island, because now they don't need the equipment there because they sold the boats.
Right.
They had to move the rides up to Tajma.
Mm-hmm.
So they got a big floating barge. Took the rides all down, loaded it on the barge. You got to tug and pull the barge up the Tajma, right up the Detroit River, right through downtown.
And by this point, he's got more rides. He's bought.
Yeah, well, he's got got a whip and a chair plane and a couple other funny little rides.
Right.
But the White Star Line, he bought a merry-go-round that he had at Sugar Island, but they had their own merry-go-round at Tajma. So he wasn't able to put his merry-go-round in there, but it was a collector's item. It was a park machine, and that used to sit in our garage or barn in Broad Street for years as a kid. I used to take my buddies over there, show them all the wild animals on my dad's merry-go-round.
Uh-huh.
But he finally sold it later on. But they had a merry-go-round already, so we didn't need it.
Right.
But on the way up to Tajma, they didn't have some of the platforms for the whip secured on the barge, and some of them slipped off into the river. And Al Byers dove in with a line and connected them, and they pulled the platforms up from the bottom of the Detroit River and got them back on the barge and continued their trip.
So at this point, he gets up to Tajma. Now he's got about 4 or 5 rides, let's say, maybe half dozen rides. He's got his novelty stands. He's got a crew of people, right, at this point, working Al,
Al Byers,
a
yeah.
couple other people.
Forget the name of that other guy that was with the polar bears.
Yeah.
He's probably, well, they're all dead now.
Yeah. So, so in the summers he's up there. He's got a full thing. Is he? And he's living.
Now he's got another little problem.
What's that?
Now he's got extra rides, and he's on the road. So he has rides that he books at carnivals, fairs and things like that. But now he's got rides up at Tajma. And he's back and forth running on. He had 2 or 3 units on the road by that point, in the mid-30s. Then the good old Tajma hits a rock down there on the moonlight to not Boblo, but Sugar Island.
Mm-hmm.
There was a moonlight, and it hit a rock or something.
What do you mean, a moonlight cruise or boat?
Yeah, a cruise. Like they do that at night, and they take and load a bunch of people on it, and they all drink and hoop and holler and get them back to the starting point later on about midnight, and they're all half in the bag or whatever. But that night, the damn boat hit a rock and took a big gash in it, and it filled up with water, and they made it to the dock at Amherstburg, and it sunk right at the dock. But the top deck was still open, and people got up to the top deck and walked right over to the dock, and nobody was hurt.
Wow.
And the boat sat there until after World War I ended, and they raised it. They were going to try to do something with it during the war, but they never did. Mm-hmm. And that ended the White Star Line's escapades when that boat sank.
So that was the boat.
1935, the boat sank.
And that was about the one up to Tajma. basically. So that basically essentially shut down Taj Mahal
That's right.
because nobody.
They tried to buy another one. They were going to build one. They didn't have the money. The insurance couldn't cover it.
What happened to the hotel up there?
It's still there, I think. But I don't think they get much business these days. And the amusement park is a boatyard for storing pleasure boats and things like that.
So, but that's much later. I mean,
Oh,
still
yeah.
we're talking somewhere around World War One. He's got his
Well,
stuff.
this is right after. This is in the 30s.
Right, that's much later, right? So going back to when he's first at Taj Mahal, he's got rides there. He's got an established thing going. He's moved from Sugar Island, but now he also has rides that he goes and he sets up at county fairs and street fairs or whatever, and he and so he gets other crews to help him do
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And he's just bouncing around between
He's running the whole show.
going to Taj Mahal, running here, and now did he trust the people that work? I mean, because obviously, if he's not at Taj Mahal, somebody else is running it.
Well, yeah. Well, up at Taj Mahal, my mother's sister was sort of the manager there in the summertime.
Okay, so he got
So-
some family people to.
Yeah, so she stayed right there. It was a summer job for her, and she ran the books and counted the money and whatever.
And so he would be mostly on the road then,
Yeah,
and because he could trust that was being taken care of.
right.
And so he owns now. He's got vehicles, like at least a couple trucks, probably right. that
Oh
he's
yeah,
driving around in, and
we had a backyard full of them.
And how does he book these things? Does he go around as the advanced guy, or how does?
Yeah, well, he had a couple of advanced guys, but my dad did mainly. He would, especially in Detroit, really for the churches. He knew all these pastors at all its Catholic churches, and he would book them all. That was up until almost World War II, when the churches all got greedy and decided they were going to run the show, and they were going to take a bigger slice of the pot. And he wouldn't give it to them, so he lost out. They all bought their own equipment, whatever.
Right.
And he was madder than hell, but he said, let them all fry and let them find out the hard way.
Right.
They did.
So, hang on, I just lost my other thing. So he's on the road. He's booking these things. So most of it's through the county. A lot of it was through the. Now, would he book them in the winter and like set them up as this, or and have some?
Yeah, he was on the phone, and the biggest convenience my dad had was a telephone. He'd be on the telephone all day long, every day of the week in the wintertime.
Wow.
The
And
thing,
was that were you one of the few people that had a phone? Was that a rarity in those days, or was it just a common thing? He was just on
well, doing business on the phone, everybody did, because that was the only way, real fast communication you had,
Right.
unless you went and went to see him personally. Today, with cell phones, it's been a blessing back then.
Sure, absolutely. So you're born in 1926.
I think I was.
Yeah, and so you start working on the Carnival during the 30s at some point as a kid, right? I mean, how old were you when you started? Do you remember? What are your earliest memories of the Carnival? Just did you spend time
Selling
there?
tickets. Yeah, we also sold tickets and rides. As long as you could, when you started to be able to count and add 2 and 2 together or subtract 2 from 10, you sold tickets.
So
And nobody came to relieve you. If you had to pee, you were out of luck.
wow. And so would you do this at the? Did you spend time at Taj Mahal, or would you go on the other?
Well, 1936 we shut down.
That's true. So you would have been right.
So
you were going around to these
I was only 10 years old then,
Right.
so we were on the road.
And so Jack, at this point, who's 10 years older than you, is he working on the Carnival as well in the summer? Or is he...
Well, sort of. He was going to school up in Canada, and he would leave, in end of August or something like that, and come back in June or July or something, whatever.
So he wasn't around.
So we didn't see him much in the wintertime.
And your sisters, were they working on it?
Yeah, they would sell. My dad, I remember he had a popcorn machines, and he would put that in. My dad would put up a whole setup for a church, like St. Mary's at Redford. I got pictures of that, 1936. Big tents, 40 by 60 tents, and they'd put up all the stands inside for the different things. And then also my dad had popcorn machines, and my sisters would make and sell popcorn. And the one year I can remember, and I was only 10 years old, I think. One of the first jobs I had, my dad had a great big platform made, about 4 by 8, and he had a couple of those made, and with a little ledge on the side, and filled 500-pound bags of peanuts. And I would put them in a little bag, blow into it, close them, and then we sold them a nickel a bag. And we sold all the goddamn peanuts.
I remember I helped Mimi sell popcorn in the.
Yeah, she had her own popcorn wagon. Yeah, but when we're talking before they had the wagon, they had machines, and my sisters worked there in the machines.
And all the other stuff, like in these tents, would he lease that out or strike?
No, basically he would lease it out to the church or whoever was the sponsoring, and they would furnish that. But he would get the equipment in there, or get the merchandise for him. If it was a blanket stand or whatever, he negotiated with the novelty stores and got it, and said, "Here it is. Here's the price, and then you owe me," and they would pay him for it.
Right. Interesting.
So he didn't have to worry about the inventories. He would just procure it and then give them the bill for it.
Right.
And he would subtract it from what they owed him.
So was he? Do you think he was good at this? I mean, was he?
He was in it over 50 years. He had to be good.
Yeah.
He was going to be good if he
Was it all cash, basically? I mean, it was all cash business. And
you didn't have checks then.
yeah, exactly. So your earliest memories are working on it is you sold tickets, you sold peanuts, these 500-pound bags. Was it 5? Really that big? And what other kinds of jobs were you doing in those days?
I started out early on running the kiddie ride, which was the little cars.
Right.
And hell, I was only about 11 or 12 when I started doing that. And then I was a little bit older, another year when I started putting it up and taking it down.
The kiddie ride.
Yeah.
So and he taught you? You got some guy to teach you how to do it, or?
Well, I just watched people. And I worked with a guy, Herb Simikins, and he and his wife had their own, and I would help them and help them put it up, they can put it down. And
They had a kiddie ride?
Yeah.
And
they had it booked on my dad's Carnival.
Okay.
And then my dad bought his own.
Oh, I see.
But I learned how to do it off of theirs.
And you were running their ride for them, or
Yeah.
so. When he would book these things, did he have these deals like somebody had their own ride? Maybe.
They work on percentages.
Right.
And he audited the tickets, the rolls, and he'd start with the starting numbers and the ending numbers, and you owe me this as much, and said, okay, the sales has been $100, you owe me 10%, just so you owe me $10, and the rest is yours.
Right. Interesting. And what do you think his biggest? What was his? Did he ever? What was his biggest? What did he hate the most about, or what was like his biggest complaint about? What was he always worried about, or what was always like? What were the biggest problems in running a business like that for him? You know?
Well, my dad was sort of he didn't complain much. He might complain to my mother, and she never even told us about it. But he just rolled with the punches. And
so the day in and day out stuff, it was just,
he enjoyed his job and his business, and he looked forward in the spring for when we got open to get the rides out. He was like a impatient cat running around waiting for it to start. He would run around to other carnivals to see what they were doing and how was business and everything, and this was just his lifeblood.
Right. And what was it? There were other people doing this, other carnivals around?
Oh yeah, and he knew them all, and they had good competition, but it wasn't really. Only one or two of them that they have what they might call cutthroat competition, but the rest of them all worked pretty close together. If one was in trouble, the other one would come and help them.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
That's interesting.
I can remember a couple times when the crews wouldn't show up, and he would get a crew from another carnival to come and help put up his rides or tear them down for him.
Oh, wow.
And the season would usually start on like St. Patrick's Day?
No, well, sometimes, not very often. Sometimes the 1st of April, depending on the weather. And I can remember having the merry-go-round up in a snowstorm in 1st of April.
I thought I
But it
remember
thawed
going
out.
to Ramona Park on a St. Patrick's Day, but maybe I'm just
No.
remembering it.
It was probably a little later.
Just for the weekend, he probably didn't keep it open all.
So in the
But he'd
summer-
like to get it out early, but he would always cognizant of what the weather was doing.
Yeah.